Hi, this is comedian and supermodel Joel Creasy.
What's up, y'all? I'm Al Jackson.
Oh, hey, it's your best friend Simon Taylor.
Hey, this is Brett Blake.
Hi, I'm Isabel Angus. Hey, this is Redown.
Hey, this is Blake Freeman.
Hey, this is Nick Cap.
What's up? This is Kyle Kinane.
Hi, this is Joseph Green.
Hey, this is Izzy Ali.
Hi, I'm Luca Muller.
Hi, this is Michael Schaefer.
Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Knox.
Hey, this is Stuart Dolman.
Hey, this is Rob Carolina.
This is Shane Moss.
You're listening to the one and only Laugh Out Proud with the homies Z and G
On Joy 94.9.
Hi, I'm Brian Shelmon. Hi, I'm Gruen There you go, one more time. Hi, I'm Ryan I always get this wrong. Hi, I'm Ryan Shelton. You're listening to Laugh Out Proud with Z and G on Joy 94.9.
We have very special guests in the studio tonight.
Just popping in.
Huge, just popping in.
Just
pop in
popping
like
by.
it's nothing. Wil Anderson is in the studio tonight.
Hello, thanks very much for having me. I did just pop in.
Yes.
I literally was just going by. I was at the Starbucks next door, buying myself a hot chocolate under my pseudonym, Bill with 2 L's.
And they didn't spot you. They didn't spot you.
No.
We spotted you.
Yeah, undercover.
However.
You guys saw me, and
Yes.
you were like, "Hey, we have a radio show,"
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh my god, I would love to be on radio. I've always wanted to be on radio." And you were like, "Well, we can make your dream come true."
And we
And we
appreciate
did.
it.
Yeah.
We do appreciate it.
We
He
made
said,
it come true.
You said to me, you said, "Hey, do you like radio?" I said, "Hey, I love radio." You said, "Hey, do you like communities?" I said, "I love communities." You were like,
True.
"Well, you are going to love the double-barreled offer we're about to make you. We have community radio, and you can be involved in it."
We were able to tick a lot of boxes just then.
I mean,
so many
we did it. We
boxes.
kicked a lot of goals.
Dreams are coming true tonight. That's.
I mean, I feel like, weirdly enough, this was a dream of mine, which at the time I felt really disturbing. I was like, well, this seems like a really niche sort of dream. But now that it's happening, I realize it was more a premonition than a dream, you know? It was like I had a vision board that I didn't even know I had inside my own mind. And I have like laid down some secret shit.
We
And
unlocked it. We did.
Yeah, unlocked it. Exactly.
Yeah.
It feels good.
Oh, I'm glad it feels good. It feels good to have you here.
So you've been a comedy legend here. All right. So you've been in comedy a long time.
Yeah, I'm old.
You're not old.
I am old,
You're
though.
just a comedy legend.
Oh, thanks, man.
How long?
It
have you-
sounds old, though. Like when you say it like that, comedy legend.
No,
Well,
that's
you
like
know.
Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I'd love to
Yeah.
see you in a Hall of Fame.
Because of the low standards that we had when I started. Like after, you know what I mean? Like when I first started comedy, how long have you been like doing comedy stuff for?
Comedy stuff? How
Yeah,
long
radio
would we say?
stuff, entertainment stuff.
8 years.
Yeah, 8
total.
years.
Okay, right? So
Trying to do it though.
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
but
you know.
that's all the first 8 years is trying to do it. And guess
Appreciate
what? That's all the next 14 years after that is trying to do it. Like I have no idea. People ask for me for advice sometimes. Like they think
Yeah.
just because I've been doing it a long time, I know what I'm talking about. It's the opposite. Like you should have got me in my first 6 weeks of doing it where I thought I knew everything.
Yeah.
I had firm opinions on every aspect of the industry in the first 6 weeks of me doing it. That was the time you wanted to interview me. I know nothing now.
Would have got your best bits during that, you're saying?
Oh, man. Like
Should have
these
known what,
days,
94
every
then?
time I do a gig, every time I do a show, I learn something about what I don't know and not the opposite way, you know?
Nice.
Yeah, it's like, it's constantly, the thing that I actually know about comedy, if I know one thing, is that there's a point in it where I think you just keep doing it because you realize that it just teaches you so much about yourself, that it disarms you in a way, that it strips you down in a way, that comedy has this capacity to reduce you to... Like, I mean, everyone, no matter how good you are, is like one bad gig away from being the worst person in comedy. Right?
Yeah, right.
Like, it doesn't matter.
No.
And it doesn't matter if you're Seinfeld or it doesn't matter if you're Chris Rock or Sarah Silverman
No.
or Hannah Gadsby or whoever. Like, the best comedians in the entire world, Dave Chappelle, still will have a night, maybe coming up soon, where they're just going to go out there and just eat it. And they're in their head, they're going to be going, I regret every single decision that has brought me to this moment. What was I doing with my life? But after a while, you realize that that's the thing about it that, you know, makes it so exciting is the idea that you constantly know, you know, it must be like what it's like to skydive, to jump out of a plane. You know, part of the thrill is that you know there is a chance that the parachute
die.
won't open.
Yeah, yeah.
There is a chance that you will die. Because otherwise, if there were no chance that you would die, then the thrill of when you don't die wouldn't be as high, right?
True. Isn't it you're only as good as your last set?
Yeah.
Is that what they say?
Well, I don't think they say that. I don't think that's true because I think that, like, you know, if someone's great and they just have one bad gig, I think that's the mistake some people make, right? But I think that so many of us live with imposter syndrome, right? This idea that at some stage somebody is going to go and tap us on the shoulder and go, I'm so sorry. There's been a terrible mistake. We did mean Wil Anderson with 2 L's.
Yes. Oh, no. No.
Yeah, it was all for him, and we've made a
his
serious
hot
mistake.
chocolate. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Bloody hell.
So, in short answer, 22 years.
22 years.
Yeah.
Very good. What year is that? Like 94? I'm not math. I'm not the math guy.
I'm not good with that either.
No. Okay. So
Put me on the spot here. I don't know.
Yeah.
In Melbourne, you got started in Melbourne.
Yeah, I started at the Espy in St Kilda.
Right.
Yeah, so they used to run open mics on Sunday. It was the best open mic that I've ever been to in my entire life. We were really lucky that we had such an amazing open mic because basically there was a graduation system inbuilt into, like, you know, sometimes people go, how do you get into comedy and how do you get from here to this room and from this room to this room?
That progression, the story.
How does it work? Well, the Espy had it inbuilt. It had the best open mic room, and then it had a Tuesday night show, which was probably, you know, the best or one of the best, like, you know, nighttime headliner shows going around as well.
Right.
So you had an opportunity to kind of, like, you know, play in the VFL or, you know, be in that sort of feeder league and get yourself good and know that once you got good enough, you know, the tap would come at some stage and you would get to do Tuesday night, the main show. So that was very helpful, you know, as a young comedian. So they used to run this, it was amazing, this open mic. I reckon it started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was only $5 to get in. It was in the Gruen room out the back of the Espy, which is, you know, where they film Rock Wiz. And, you know, they used to do stand-up shows there. And it's a brilliant room. You know, the bar's towards the back. They would put a bunch of tables down the front. And because it was only $5, people would kind of go half to watch open mic and half for sort of a recovery session on a Sunday. So you get those people who are maybe just warming up to go to a band out the front bar of the Espy on a Sunday or whatever, and decided to, oh, it's $5, you know, let's go in and have a couple of beers and, you know, watch some stand-up for a while. So it'd always be pretty full, and they tend to do it in shifts. So there'd be 2 big halves. So I reckon there'd be 8 or 10 in each half of the night doing 5 minutes at a professional MC, you know. And I don't know if they might have had like a, you know, a more established kind of headliner, you know, to finish off the night. I can't quite remember, but I know that the great thing about it was that sometimes, you know, you might see enough in one half. And so what had happened in the second half, you get a whole new shift of, so the audience energy would also, you know, have a really, for a long show, it didn't have that drop in energy that you would think like a show that has 20 people on it would have, right? So it was great, and, you know, there was a whole bunch of comedians around my stage, like Hughesy and Rove and Hallie started a little bit later than that, but Korean, American Rosso, and like you know, and a bunch of other, you know, fabulous people who are still around now. And
what a hot group to come up with.
Well, a lot of us were all starting out at the same time, you know,
crazy.
Tripod and, you know, so there was heaps of cool people to be able to, you know, be new at comedy with. Exactly. And we were really lucky we're also our friends. You know, we were all really friendly. And at that stage, the size of the industry was, and this was what I mean about, we were all people who hadn't gone into comedy because you could get a radio show out of it or get a TV show or any of those sort of things. I mean, the Melbourne Comedy Festival, I think, just celebrated 30 years of the Melbourne Comedy Festival.
30 was last year?
Yeah.
I think so.
Right?
Yeah.
So I've been doing the festival. I've done 22 festivals. Whoa. So that means when I started doing the festival, you know, I was 8 years old. You know, like it was still, it was still a little festival. People think of it now as being this like massive behemoth of,
takes
you know,
over the city.
You know, 600 shows and, you know, 800,000 people and all these sort of things. But it wasn't that then. You know, it was this tiny little, doing stand-up comedy was like, still a bit like running away to join the circus. You know, there was the big gig and there was a few shows like that on TV. But in a general sense, like being a comedian wasn't really a pathway to anything yet. So the reason to be a comedian was that you wanted to be a comedian.
Yeah, that's it.
So suddenly there was just a whole bunch of us who wanted to do this thing that at the time still seemed like we were lucky. We were in that real sweet spot of there being enough of a generation before us to start establishing things. You know, there were comedians with radio jobs. There were comedians with TV jobs. You know, that hard work had been done to establish the idea that you could do it.
That's where it goes.
And then we were kind of the generation that got to come through and benefit from the opportunities that they had opened up. And now someone who starts it now, starts it, you can't start it thinking you're running away to the circus now.
No,
because you look around and you go, well, all these people are comedians, and look at them. They all have TV shows and radio shows and have written books and are doing this. And so you expect that is part of what, the industry you're entering. We were so lucky that we were just kind of on that last bit of it where, for us, it was just about, putting on a show and then going and drinking all night together and, drinking, mulled wine and, smoking weed in backyards and, having these conversations about, our art and stuff. It was the best.
Did they pay you in beer back in the time?
Yeah, which is still why I'm a raging alcoholic, unfortunately. So I was talking to someone about it with, they're doing a documentary about Fiona O'Loughlin, and we were just talking about Fiona had asked some of her friends for this documentary, and her request had been, please try to speak honestly and openly about, she wants to make something that is real, not a bunch of her friends just sitting around and,
reading scripts.
Or pretending that, some of the worst aspects of, our world and whatever don't exist. She wanted people to, be honest about it. Right. And I said to her, this new generation, they don't really drink. A lot of comedians don't drink now, or certainly don't drink at gigs. They might socialise together. But for us, it was so intrinsically tied to alcohol. Like you said, you got paid in beer. Like the first 2 years, you got paid in beer, and so. In our twisted logic, the more beer you drank, the better value you were getting for, it was almost like the higher price comic you were. You weren't going to go down and do a 5-minute spot for one beer, but if you got 6 in, you're like, well, that's all right, actually,
That's more than a beer a minute. That's doing all right. That's doing all right.
Yeah, it's a pretty good job, right? It was a time that was just a little bit more, I feel very grateful that was the time I started, because I think that, now there are so many people who are just so brilliant and good, and I see, sometimes, the space not opening up for them just because there's so many people.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so you suddenly go, like in our day, if you were half good, you probably did okay, because there was enough jobs to go around that everyone kind of had a job. Yeah. But now there's more comedians than people need.
Comedian surplus right now. Yeah. So how was developing the first open mic set? Like, how did you go about writing those jokes?
I remember really distinctly. So I had a job that I was just finishing up. Because I have a journalism degree, and because I was from the country, and I didn't know stand-up comedy was a job, even though I really think, I always, it was very fashionable to say you fell into it. It was very fashionable, to kind of like pretend that it wasn't because I think if at its very heart is like the idea of stand-up comedy is something that it's very hard to say, I thought I'd be good at it, because basically what you're saying is, like, as a 14-year-old kid, like living on a road named after my dad on a farm of, area of 250 people, didn't have a shop, you know what I mean? Like, I grew up in a place that didn't have a shop, and I was sitting there in my bedroom going, you know what I can do for a living? Just talk. I reckon I am better at talking than most other people, and I'm so good at talking that I will be able to charge people to hear me talk. What about 14-year-old farm boy? I don't know. We'll get to that later. But I reckon, it is an arrogant thing to think if you break it down that right? So I don't know why I thought I could do it, but I had a feeling.
Yeah.
I had a feeling that I could. I had a feeling I liked stand-up comedy, and there was just something about it that I thought that I got.
Yeah. Who'd you watch back?
Billy Connolly was the big one.
Yeah.
If I was going to... But, see, again, even in this day and age, if I started comedy now, I could watch everyone.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I could get on Netflix and I could watch everything from, Hannah Gadsby to Dave Chappelle to Bill Maher to, I don't know, I could watch small shows and big shows and people doing spots. And if I found someone I liked, I did this the other night. I was like, I want to watch some comedy for fun.
Yeah, right.
Like, just not because I'm going to go to see a friend's show or not because I'm at a gig, but just... And it made me think. I was like, who's my favourite comedian in the world?
In the world? Ooh.
To just watch and enjoy.
Right.
Now, the first 10 years, 15 years of my life, I would have said that was Billy Connolly. He was the person who really inspired me.
Yeah.
I went to see him at Hamer Hall with my mum when I was 17,
Right.
and I remember sitting in that room that night and knowing for sure in my head that that was what I wanted to do with my life.
That was the moment.
It took me a very long time to then, circle back and actually start to do it.
Right, yeah.
But I remember distinctly thinking, being in this room, this is what I like and this is what I want to do. So it would have been Billy for a long time, and I still absolutely admire Billy. But I guess, your taste change and whatever. And his best work was, a longer time ago. And so I was like, who is that now for me? And so I flipped through a few things, and it was like I was like some horny guy on the internet who couldn't quite work out what I was horny about. Do you know what I mean? Like I would open something and go, nah.
Not the flavour I'm after.
Yeah, this isn't exactly like, normally I like this, but right now it just isn't for whatever reason doing it for me, And so I did that. I flicked through a few until I was like, nah, this is what I want. This is what I need. And it was Dylan Moran. Do you know Dylan Moran?
Moran, yeah, of course.
And his stand-up is, for me, just the density of the language and the originality of what it is that he's doing. Like, he has quite a simple conceit in that he really just talks about very simple things, really. The life, the world, his family, his perspective on things, But it's the way that he talks about those things, the insight and perspective and use of language that he has that I just find rewatchable in a way that, sometimes comedy is about surprise, and the first time you see it, you go, this is a brilliant show, but you're like, well, I don't really need to see it again. I saw the trick. Whereas, like, I find Dylan Moran, like, rewatchable. And to a certain extent, I would say that about Connolly too, where it's the beauty of him telling the story that is as interesting as the story is actually going. I'm here to watch you do what you do. I don't really care. It was like early on when I started doing, the festival, and I started just naming my shows with a pun for my name.
Your name, yep.
And the real reason for that was that I didn't. Part of it is just simple that you have to put the title of your show in August and you do it in April. Yeah. And who knows what they're going to talk about in April and August, right?
Yeah.
But the second thing is I didn't want to have to. I never wanted people to choose whether they were going to come and see my show based on what I was talking about. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. I felt like if they were coming because the show was about politics or because the show was about growing up on a farm and they related to that or whatever, that in itself was a bit of a failure. Okay. I wanted to be good enough that, no. The show will be, I'll start talking and then when I stop talking, the show's over. Yeah. And I hope that's what you came for. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So what was the first sort of break you got in comedy?
So
how long had you been doing open mics for?
I mean, breaks a bit of a different perspective now than it was then, because for us it was really about our aims and ambitions were pretty simple, right? We all wanted to get Tuesday night at the Espy.
Yeah.
And then that would open some doors of, being able to headline other rooms and stuff. Yeah. And it was a really clear thing. If you got Tuesday night at the Espy, getting there opened up the opportunity to do some of these other rooms that were around town, because it was like you were of a certain level, it was like getting past, a bit in the industry.
Yeah.
And then there was a next level, which was Cheese Shop, which was Dave Taranto's room. Now, Dave Taranto was this amazing Melbourne iconic person who loved comedy. He wasn't a comedian. He was a funny guy, but a guy who was a fan of comedy and a patron of comedy. And he actually used to have a show on Triple R called The Cheese Shop. And based on the old Monty Python routine. But he would play comedy. So, these days you can download a podcast or get on YouTube or do what I did the other night and just watch clips of someone.
Yeah, right.
Back then you couldn't, right? You could buy a few albums or whatever in the shops, but you could. So when we heard Bill Hicks for the first time, was on Dave's show on Triple R, but he would also play local comedy. Like, he would have this live room on Wednesdays, the Cheese Shop, and it was the cool room. It was the room that you wanted to play, where like Anthony Morgan was on and Judith Lucy was on and Greg Fleet was on and, Marty Sheargold was doing New Joke City with Matt King and Sue Ann Post was talking about being a Mormon, a lesbian, and all this stuff was really revolutionary. Anthony Morgan would tell these 40-minute stories about going down on someone that were like, you were just like, I don't know what this is, but I can't miss it. You know, I have to be here to see what is happening. So then our dream was to get on at Cheese Shop. And that was really seen as being, if you could get on at Cheese Shop, then that was like a real nod from the industry that you were doing the right thing. So
who was the first one in your contemporary group to get the Cheese Shop?
There was this guy called Peter Jago who doesn't do comedy anymore, but he was probably, you know, the best of all of us at the time. You know, of the new kids who were coming through, there was probably me. Hughesy was probably a bit more mainstream back then still, and Cheese Shop was a bit more, you know, snobby. You know, he was talking about being on the dole and being unemployed and a bit sweary and not talking about politics enough for, you know, it was one of those, it was a, you know, inner city, lefty Melbourne, art room where, you know, so.
They still exist.
He was great. Yeah, he was doing very well at the time, but he wasn't quite, you know, Cheese Shop that early on. Jago would have been the first one. I reckon maybe I was probably the second one. Like my stuff, because my stuff back then was very, I was doing a lot of political stuff, you know, particularly early on. So it kind of suited their room. And I remember Pauline Hanson. I actually remember the piece, I reckon, because Pauline Hanson had literally just come onto the scene. So that's 20 years ago, 21 years ago or whatever it is, right? And so I had a piece that I had written, and it was, I'd kind of rewritten Dr. Seuss's I Do Not Like Green Eggs and Ham, but about like the things that, you know, as if Pauline Hanson had written the piece. That's what that was that was the conceit of the piece, and people really liked it. It was a funny bit that people were responding to really well, you know, and I reckon that was the first piece that I did at Cheese Shop. And once I was in there and that crowd liked me, that was the one that for me, I felt like, if you're talking about something that was a break early on, that felt like it really made a difference. So I started doing really well there. And because that room had this really loyal following, you got, like, even though I was like I was the turtle, you know, I was like the bottom of the rung, like in this thing, but because you're hanging with this cool crowd, you get the cool by association, right?
They pull you up almost,
right?
That push-pull of it.
And the other thing is, if Judith Lucy's going out on the road and she's looking for some new kid to take out to open for her or whatever, well, suddenly you're the person that they asked to go out, right? So suddenly you're just doing these much better shows. So I went on the road with Fleety, I went on the road with Judith, you know, and you're doing shows with Rod Quantock and all these people who are, you know, so you're just learning, you know, from these people, you know, really, really well. And I was keen to, you know, suck it all up and see what was happening. And then that led to, there was this Canadian comedy trio called Corky and the Juice Pigs. If you've never heard of them.
The Juice Pigs?
No, the Juice Pigs.
Right.
But they have a song, which was their most famous song, which probably doesn't hold up for two reasons in this day and age. One is that you can't say the word Eskimo anymore. It's Inuit. But it's called The Only Gay Eskimo in the Tribe. Have you ever heard this song? It's like it's a very famous old comedy song, but from a different era, you know. But they were this brilliant trio. So Phil Nicol, who's still a big UK comic, he's based in the UK, but Sean Cullen, who did a whole bunch of SCTV and all these sort of things, and Greg, who I think ended up being a school teacher in the Northern Territory or something when they all split up. But they at the time, they were like the Doug Anthony All-Stars or the Tripod or the, you know, the Auntie Donna of the time, right? So they did a month at the festival at the Prince Pat, where the Cheese Shop would be. They actually did their show there during the comedy festival, and they needed a support act. And so I got to do 20 nights of, you know, my first ever comedy festival, doing support for Corky and the Juice Pigs, who were selling like 300 tickets a night, you know. And the thing about them was, because they were big improvisers, so they every night would get me to give them a word or a phrase or something, and they would weave it through the show just as an in-joke to us. So partly that kept me watching the show every night, which was just a great education. But secondly, because I learned about how shows change and how you can change them and how energies change and how you can do something differently but the same and all these sort of things, right? So it was a masterclass, and I would watch it every night because of this thing, right? So I learned a lot. But the other thing was they did it in reverse. So I was a pretty new kid, but they were like, no, every night we're going to give you something. So I'm really just trying to do my 10 minutes, beforehand and get through it. But they're like, no. Every night we're giving you a challenge, and you have to. And we're going to sit up the back, and we're going to watch you do your set, and you're going to do that challenge in your set. And so as the nights went on, they would make the things increasingly difficult, right? So, like, I'm doing a real political set, was it like a premise or a word or like? So, well, I'll give you 2 examples of the more. I can't remember some of the easy ones, but I remember the 2 hardest ones. The hardest one of all, I thought, was actually this one, because I was quite doing some really, you can imagine, like, inner city, Melbourne, long hair, lefty, right on, like Jeff Kennett, was premier. There was a real, you can imagine the sort of earnest shit I was rolling out, right? And so one night they made me, towards the end, they made me drop in the expression 5 times in my set, and I wasn't allowed to explain to anyone why I was doing it. I like tits, but I'm really an ass man, which was completely incongruous with everything else that I was like rolling with on stage, right? So that was real hard. Like, and I'm not sure that I did it, but I'm not sure that I pulled off, doing the gig well as well. Yeah. But the last night, and this was the one that gave me actually great confidence, was they said, you've got to fall over 10 times during your set. What? Slapstick. Yeah. They just said, you've got to fall 10 times. Never explain it. And I remember about the 4th time I fell, because the first time people were concerned, and then and then like
how do
a couple
you
of
sell
times
it every
they're
time?
like, what are they doing? But there was something around the 4th time where I think my body, and this is why I think you can always come up with better material on the stage than you ever can sitting at home, right? Right. There is something about being in that moment that activates your mind.
The presence,
right? Yeah. You're in it. And I think it was even just, and I'm not sure that they like sat down and went, this is what you would take the, grasshopper and chopsticks and, I don't think that's what it was. Yeah. But for me, I think it was literally, there was a bit of having to actually fall. I'm not a physical comedian, and having to actually fall and concentrating on falling made me connect with what I was doing in a way that me doing my material didn't. Suddenly
gave you a different
awareness. You're part of a perspective. Yeah. You're doing comedy rather than reciting comedy, right? Right, yeah. I often say there's 2 very different stages of comedy, right? So one is the process of creation, and the other is the process of recreation. Right? So when you're developing material, you are literally in the middle of a creative process. You are creating material, often on stage or in the moment, right? That's a creative process. But then later, once you've like honed the material, you've got to a point where it's like going to be similar every night. Right. You're actually not creating anymore. You're recreating, right? You're trying to go back to the moment where you found the moment where you think it works best. So on the first thing, you're trying to explore something to find how it will work best. And then afterwards, what you're trying to do is move to a different state, which is to recreate that moment of when it worked best. Now, if you can combine the 2 in a little way, I think eventually that's where you get to doing it really well, which is in the process of recreation. You can have a base of knowing this is how the beats of it or the vibe of it sort of work, but then you can deviate, surf, right? I say it's like driving a car or surfing or any of those sort of things, which is like, there's a point where they'll give you your P's, right, because you've passed the test. Right. But you're still thinking about driving when you pass your test, right? Like the day after you get your license, you're still thinking, look over my shoulder, count the blah, blah, blah. Like I have to put this foot down and do this. But now when you drive, if you've been driving for 22 years, you don't think about driving. You don't ever think about, you think about which way will I go, or what's that guy up there doing, or what radio station should I listen to, or you know what, there's a bit of traffic up there. So today I might take this way around. And it's the same on stage, right? True. If you get to the point where you're like, I know how this goes, I know how to do this. You know what? Normally it goes if I go bang, 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 bang. But for this crowd, that's not really what they want. They wanted to go, wander over here and smell the roses here, and wander over here and smell the roses here. And we'll still get there. We're just kind of, we trust our ability to go in a bit of a different way.
Would you call that a comfort or a confidence you get?
I mean...
Because they're similar in a way as well. But I think, because sometimes for people it's the presence of just being on stage. There's different hurdles you overcome in doing the stand-up process.
Yeah, I mean... Look, it's a bit of a mystery, and I'm not sure that I like to think that it's the process of doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Learning
I'm going
by
to go and
doing,
do some
sort of.
comedy.
Yeah.
Right? And the other thing is, it's unmasterable. Like, if you've signed up to comedy, you've got to at some stage resign yourself to the fact that you have signed up to something and you are driven by the idea that you are trying to master something that is completely impossible to master.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, literally, you've decided, I'm going to dedicate my life and I'm going to, you know, like, feel terrible about, you know, the nights when I can't master something that is basically impossible to master.
Yeah.
Because the thing about comedy is it's not a still thing either.
No.
Like, even if you master a joke, time can change it.
Oh, yeah.
Context can change it. The person it's about can die and suddenly the joke doesn't work anymore. You know what I mean? Like, all those... I mean, I remember when Michael Hutchence died, the first person I rang was Michelle Laurie because she used to have this, like, such a good In Excess bit. And I was like, she won't be able to do that bit anymore. Like,
shit.
people will
goes
just
with
feel
them.
sad. You know what I mean? Like, they're burying her bit with Michael. It's a real tragedy out of it all, to
It's
be
a little
honest.
sad. It is.
Yeah, I mean, In Excess's best stuff were behind him, but those, you know...
While we work on some fresh Michael Hutchence material, you listen to this song. Listen to Laugh Out Proud
Z&G.
on Joy 94.9.
Hi, it's Damien Cullen. I've been told to say that I'm on Joy listening to Z&G. Let me go. Been here ages.
We still have Wil Anderson in the studio, of course. Thank you so much for sticking around, Will.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
And you were really breaking it down during that last song, bringing out some dance moves for that one.
It was
Yeah, I
great
appreciate
dance
that.
moves. Yeah. What would you call those dance moves?
Epilepsy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
Relatable. I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
he gets it. He gets
Oh,
it
you get
100%
it?
on a personal
You
level.
actually get
so-
it?
Yeah. And he nailed it. He nailed it. It was fantastic.
That's
It was
good.
fantastic.
We had to put a helmet on him and everything. It was
Yeah,
great.
he bit the wooden spoon. Everyone's fine. Everyone's fine.
So we were talking about breaks. Now, what was, I guess, you know, like you did comedy festival for like how many sort of comedy festivals?
Okay, so the gala was the big thing. You know,
Right.
so back in those days, you know, again, there was a bit of it more of a simple graduation, right? So started doing Cheese Shop, did the comedy festival.
Yeah.
Wanted to do my own solo show at the comedy festival.
Right.
So I did, you know, did a season of my, you know, my own show, and it went well. You know, it
That's
didn't
good.
go.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a budget of. I remember it. Like I have it still. The budget at home. Like literally have the budget at home.
Nice.
And I think we spent $5,000 on the show
Yeah.
in total, and I made $4,500 in box office. So we sold some tickets.
Yeah.
Not a heap. You know, like I mean, literally. You know, a small amount of hundreds of tickets, but like enough that, you know, we made back the majority of our costs. And then another comedian who had been a more established comedian. I don't know who this person was, but the festival had done something for the festival that was worth a $500 payment. And obviously to this person, $500, it wasn't worth the paperwork or whatever. And so they had said, you know what, give it to someone who, you know, has had a good festival but would need the money.
Wow,
So,
right.
so the festival, so out of the blue, I was about 500 short on making my budget, and out of the blue, the festival said, you know, you've had a great festival, and one of our, you know, people wanted
wow.
to pass on some money, and so here it is.
Wow.
So for a kid who, you know, had put all my money, like, you know, I was
Yeah.
working, you know, other jobs to pay for the festival.
Yeah.
It was a big deal, you know, $500 was a big deal. So did that and felt like, oh well, this has gone okay, you know. You know, obviously had some nights when there was two people. And look, I've had some nights where on that tour, I've said this before, I had family members come, you know, friends
Right.
and family came.
Come down from the farm?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And family lived up here, and friends of mine from high school and uni and all those sort of
Right.
things came and saw the show. And many of those people, despite the fact that I have been quite good at this for quite a long time now, have never been back to see me. They were so scarred by that initial experience that despite all evidence to the contrary that I have got much better since then, they are like, nah, saw him once, it was no good,
Oh, no.
and I don't believe the reviews, and I don't believe the crowds.
What a tough crowd.
It was terrible, and I'm not coming back.
I just catch on the tally now, that's all.
Yeah. But there was enough of it that was obviously okay enough that I had the, you know, confidence of going, I'm going to do another one. So the next year I did my first of the Wil puns, because the first one didn't have a Wil pun. And
What was the name of the first one?
Diet Life.
Diet Life.
Oh, it was so earnest. It was a whole... So anyway, this was the tagline. It was Diet Life. reality without the calories. Pow. Take that.
That's awesome.
You've got my attention.
Yeah, take that sugar movie. But weirdly enough, it played on themes, even though in the very naive and kind of self-important and all those sort of things that it was. But many of the themes that were in it, which are about the kind of reality gap, the way that we are constantly being manipulated by sort of marketing and advertising in subtle ways that we don't really know, and that I have an interest in, like, you know, in those things,
right?
And you know, and not even always in a judgmental way, but just in the fact that I find it weird that we see 5,000 commercial messages a day, and we rarely sit around and talk about the fact of, hey, how do you think that seeing 5,000 commercial messages a day affects us as a human race?
True.
Do you think the reason that none of us are happy is that we're locked into an aspirational cycle of capitalism where the system itself doesn't allow us to be happy? Because if I like my car, why would I ever buy a new car? True. So I have to like my car enough, but not as much as that other car that I can afford soon if I worked hard. Like, those themes are reasonably prevalent in the work that I do today still.
Exactly.
But it was very naive and innocent and, you know, right on and, you know, very... Anyway, some people liked it because there was not that many people around, and I was fine enough. And so I did the first of the Wil shows the next year, which was I Am the Wilrus. And I thought it was not a bad show. Like, I mean, for where I was at, that was...
Did you change the venue? Did you...
I reckon... So, the first year I was in... maybe the first 2 years I was at the Regent Room in the town hall,
right,
I reckon.
Yeah.
So I got a town hall venue the first year, which was obviously very helpful. And then, I reckon maybe the first 2 years, it's a long time ago now, but I think the Regent Room the first 2 years. So I think I was in the same venue as the first year, which is good. You know, you've had a month of getting used to the space and the room, and you know it going into your second festival. You're not readjusting to a new space. You've got a direct measurable against the previous year.
Right. Yeah,
so like on those nights when there's 4 people in or 5 people in, you can still go, oh, well, you know, this is actually still better than last year when on this night there was 2 people in. You know what I mean? And on the nights when there's 60, that's better than the nights when there was 30 and you thought it was good last time. So
always. Yeah.
You know,
awesome.
you've got a reasonable measurable there. So that season was the one where I think people started to invite me on to, you know, other shows.
Showcases
and exactly.
Yeah.
So I reckon the next year I did the gala. So I think the year after that I did the gala. And then that was the thing that, you know, really that just changed everything.
Do you get a little bit of cash if you do the gala?
I don't think so. I think it's, you know what? Maybe there is I think there's like
appearance fee, you know?
Yeah, because they put it on television.
Yeah.
So I think, but it's because it's a charity event, you know, it's for Oxfam.
Of course.
So we all technically, I think we all
donate our time. What a controversial question then. Holy hell.
Yeah. So, I mean, my understanding is we donate our time, but I think these days there's some sort of fee, but it's certainly not an amount that... No, the thing about doing the gala, particularly back in the day, was... Again, it was still the only place people were seeing stand up on TV.
Right, exactly.
So, you know, it would change your whole season. Like, I mean, I remember the first time Hughesy did it and he just nailed it. And he went from like selling, you know, a handful of tickets to sell out nights every night. But he said the other thing is, of course, because you do your best 5 minutes. So these days when I do something like that, I'll do old material, nothing from the new show.
It's gold,
But those days, you don't have old material. That's good, right? So you're doing something from the show you're doing. And the first year, Hughesy, I remember him saying to me, that's great, you know, I'm selling out, but I get to the best bit of the show and no one laughs because they all heard it on the gala. So it's like...
That's pretty spot on. Got Hughesy coming in now just to compare. Yeah.
But so that was the first thing, and then that led to a bunch of other things. I did in Melbourne tonight. I did Recovery. Do you remember the show Recovery?
Yeah,
which is Dylan Lewis had this like Saturday morning show on the ABC. It was like a rock music show.
That's right.
It was like the worst gig I've ever done in my entire life. Oh man! So it's like
9 o'clock in the morning, Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Not great time for stand-up.
No, no.
It's 14-year-old girls and boys in the audience, but predominantly girls who've all come to see, their favourite band that's going to play on Recovery and cheer while Jill introduces music videos, right? You know what I mean? And you're doing stand-up, but how's this? So the audience sit in kind of rake seating in a V, right? Which would be quite a nice audience to perform to if they were in front of you, but they're not. Because for the bands and stuff, they wanted that energy, on the thing. So the band's playing and all the kids are cheering in the background. So you're literally doing a stand-up with the entire audience behind you. And the only person who was in front of you was the cameraman and just Dylan Lewis standing next to the cameraman, right?
That's so strange
So
to me.
9 o'clock in the morning, trying to do stand-up in front of people who can't hear you, because they're behind you, right? So they're not seeing your mouth or hearing the words. They're just waving to their mum behind you on the telly. And so you're doing stand-up to no one. Anyway, I did that. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
You got seen though.
It was terrible.
It was like breaking the magician's code of that. I never thought of the realities of when you've got the audience behind you, of just there is nothing in front of you.
Nothing.
Yeah, that it scares me.
So, and then the big one was Good News Week. So,
Right, yeah.
at the time, Paul McDermott and Micah Robbins and Ted Robinson and all that crew had started doing Good News Week at the ABC, and that.
So that was your into the ABC.
Yeah. I was because that was before Triple J. So, so I started doing Good News Week because someone saw me at the comedy festival. That's how that's how they got people. And so someone had come and seen my show and thought that I'd be good on Good News Week, and that was when the idea that I was talking about newsy stuff and I hadn't sat down because Good News Week didn't exist, so I hadn't sat down and gone, I'll talk about these things because there's going to be this show that'll be good for. I just happened to be talking about those things, and a show came along that obviously was looking for some young people who were interested in joking about the news and politics and stuff, and I was. So I got to do the show, and then because they were things that I was already interested in, I mean, I had a journalism background and I was kind of doing stand-up about those things. You get on these shows, and I'm a reasonably good off the cuff, performer. So I found that doing panel shows like that was really good for me, I knew the news, I could be funny about the news. I was I was the new kid, I was the long-haired young person on the panel with all these kind of older comedy people. And, that was a good person to be. It was, and so that just opened, that was the thing for me that, that led to Triple J, and then Triple J led to, Glass House, and then, Glass House led to Gruen, and I mean, really, that's all I've done, apart from doing the comedy festival for 22 years. So,
and how was pitching Gruen itself?
Well, see, again, I kind of was very lucky in a way with that show because, to be honest, I wouldn't have pitched it. It wasn't my idea originally. I mean, I think
apart from the first comedy festival show.
Yeah. But I think, there's probably more of my DNA in that show now than anybody's who's been involved. But that show is very much an amalgam of a lot of people's ideas and a lot of people's visions. But, I'm the only person who's been involved in it solely from the start of it. So, and by the nature of the fact that I host it, a lot of the vision of the show eventually becomes filtered through me. But it's a lot of other people's, ideas and stories and influences and, that have made that up. So it's not the show that if you walked me into a studio and went, what's the show that you will make up and do? This isn't the show that I would have made up and do. I become kind of a funnel or a filter or my vision for this show has been a voice for a whole bunch of other people's ideas and vision for the show. So the pitch itself was really simple. Andrew Denton at the start literally said to the ABC that he wanted to make a show about advertising that gave people the tools to understand advertising in the same way that Frontline, the show that Working Dog had made, gave people the tools to understand current affairs shows.
Right.
And that's all he really wanted to do. And we had that idea that back then it was, that the average person sees 3,000 commercial messages a day. Let's assume that, and it's 5,000 now, delivered to our phones, specially with, but back these days there was none of that. This is 11 years ago. People forget this is before Facebook and Twitter and smartphones that would deliver ads straight to you. We didn't know what the show was going to be. We thought it might be a panel show like Good News Week. We thought it might be a documentary series like Louis Theroux. Right. We explored a whole bunch of different ideas. And then eventually, when we couldn't quite decide what we were doing, we're like, you know what? Let's just get some people from the advertising industry and do some workshops with them. And we weren't even really thinking necessarily at that point that was going to be the show. But there was Andrew and there was a guy called John Casimir. And they knew what they wanted to achieve. And I think often that's actually the secret. Because Gruen's a really different show now to what it was when we started 11 years ago. And if you watch each season, there's often but if you don't notice the differences, but if you watch them back to back, you'd notice the differences.
Right.
Because I think that you don't notice the differences because we're always trying to achieve the same thing. We're just trying to achieve it in a better or different way, right? And so often people are driven by format. And I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that people make is I'm going to buy that format, right? I think the format is most of the time the least interesting part of a television show.
Yeah. It's the concept within the
Seinfeld's
structure,
not good because of the format of Seinfeld. And in the same way as Curb Your Own Enthusiasm isn't good because of the format of Curb Your Own Enthusiasm. It's not the format that's important. Like, the format of Have You Been Paying Attention is not a particularly inventive or interesting format.
No, it's the
but they
jokes
got the
within
right
it.
people and they cast it really well and they know how to balance the show between smart and funny so they don't do too much of each. They film it in a fun way. All those things make it a good show. They know what they're trying to achieve, right? That's why it's a good show. And that's why regardless of the ingredients they put into that show, the people and whatever, if they know what they're trying to achieve at the end, you can make what you want to make. I think the big mistake in this day and age is that we concentrate on this idea of the formula for the best radio show in town is like a footballer and a girl and like a jock, right?
Yeah, right.
So
Okay.
you know what? We'll get a footballer and a girl and a jock, and then that will be. No, that's actually not the point.
Yeah.
What is it they're trying to achieve? What question is this show answering? That's the thing that I always ask our people is like, what's the question we're trying to answer? What's the reason that this show exists? Why are we here? What's the purpose of what we're doing right now?
Giving it reason.
No, I'm just asking to you guys.
Oh. Strap in.
We'll be right back up now. So how does going about writing a Gruen episode?
So we do it collaboratively.
Yeah.
So normally we have initial, we have probably a constant brainstorming process now because we have the luxury of knowing that it's an ongoing process. You're kind of always thinking about it now. So I often in our off season, I'm just putting the show together, like a bird building its nest.
Right.
Like a lot of me is just like looking at the world, sometimes just reading a bunch of stuff, trying to like, what's changed? What's going on? What's going on here? What are we being sold? What's the bullshit here? And like just thinking about that a lot. And sometimes, and then it's like going, what haven't we talked about? Like, oh, hang on, this is interesting. Like this, Amazon Alexa thing is like sucking up our information and using it to, sell to us in return. That's interesting. Maybe I'll go and read some more about that and I'll clip this thing out here. Oh, what's this about? Why would they do that? Like a lot of it's just looking at things and going,
That'll be good for the
why
show.
is that? Why is that like that? And if there's a good question there, if you're like, geez, there seems to be a lot of redheaded people in ads at the moment. Is there? It's like, and why would that be if there is? John Casimir, his big thing was always, and I think it's a great bit of advice, which is just assume that everything is on purpose. Right?
Right.
So if I'm looking at something, right? If I'm looking at like the Joy, logo up on the wall there, right? And I'm looking at the design of that, and I'm looking at the colors of that, and I'm looking at the fact that Joy is like written down the side, and it's not written like up the top, and it's that size and that size, and the
fresh
pink color.
attention.
Every part of it.
But whatever, assume that every single one of those things was a choice, right? So then ask, okay, so why did they make those choices, right? That's where you start, right? Assume that it was a choice,
Right.
and then ask, why was that choice? And, what we're trying to do with Gruen, because Gruen's not really a show about advertising. Gruen's a show about capitalism at its heart, and advertising is the poetry of capitalism, right?
Right.
It's the language through which capitalism speaks, advertising, It's the, so we try to, like, the people who know us best are the people who are trying to sell us something, right? You can have as many theories about, like, what makes human beings tick, but the people who really need to know what motivates you are the people who want to take the money out of your pocket in exchange for their thing, right?
Ultimately, yeah.
Right. So we like to go, well, if these people know so much about us and are doing so many things to influence the decisions we make, whether it's the colour, whether it's the smell, whether it's the fact that this shop that I've walked into has consistent lighting and you never know what time of the day it is, whether it's because I can't find my car in the car park because it's designed in an intentionally confusing way, so I'll keep shopping. All these sort of things. Assume they're deliberate, right?
Yeah.
And then what does that say about us? What does what we see, what does how we're being sold to say about us as human beings and our motivations? That's what the show's about, right? So you want to get to that. You want to get to that bit of going, how are we being sold to?
Right.
And what does that say about us?
Right. So
That's how. So we start collecting, and then we just literally the way we put together a show, really simply, is through a series of meetings. So we
Writers'
have
room
very
situation.
small crew. So you're talking in a day-to-day sense, and I won't go through editors and producers and those sort of things. I just want to give you a real basis of what the core creative team. But so you literally have myself and Nick Murray, who are the executive producers of the show, and you have Polly Connolly, who essentially runs the show. Polly is the heart and soul of the show and has been involved in the show every one but one of the seasons, I believe. And so she's been with us a really long time, and she's one of the best in the business, and she's just great, Polly. So, but she's like what you call, in my book, the showrunner. She's doing the day-to-day of it, and Nick and I, have the luxury of going about our business and doing our other things and swanning into the meetings and those sort of things, right? So then you have a series of people. So you have Sarah, who's our head researcher, who's been with us, I think, again, all but maybe one or two of the seasons.
Right.
Jeez.
Sophie Braham, who is our head writer, and she has started as a researcher on the show, and she's now a head writer. John Casimir used to be the head writer of the show, who was one of the original creators. Andrew Denton used to be the EP. He left after series 3 or series 4.
Wow.
But he, the great thing about the show is that Andrew still contributes ideas. I'll get an email from Andrew every now and again when he's stumbled across something cool. And John, even though he's moved on to do other things as well, still often contributes to the show, and
that's awesome.
Has great care for the show.
You can't escape the show.
Yeah. But when they see something that they know would be good for the show, they pass it on.
Right, yeah.
They're like, hey, this would be good for Gruen, or I read this really interesting article. And I think they're very proud of what they, should be very proud of creating. And even though they're not, I think one of the great things that they've done for all of us is that often the creators of something don't realize when, I think that, I was talking to John about it, quite recently, and he was saying to me, sometimes you're not making the show that I would encourage you to make if I was there.
Right.
He said, but the nice thing is that it's not my show, it's your show now.
Yeah, right.
I created it, and he did, and he will always created it, and so much of his DNA is in the day-to-day of what we do. Same with Andrew, and same with everyone who's been involved in the show.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the show is kind of bigger than any of the particular people, and the ability for them to step away and the show to kind of evolve into the next thing that it's got to be.
It's a machine in itself. Yeah.
So when John left as head writer, John's one of the greatest television writers. He did Andrew Denton's Enough Rope. He did his new interview show. He's a brilliant writer, John, and a brilliant producer. When he left, he had Groom Soph, who came through the system, as a researcher, a writer. Because really, all we have is 3 researchers. It's like a head researcher, 3 other researchers. Ooh. That's it. And me and a head writer. That's the whole show.
Wow, okay, gee.
There's much more than that, of course.
Yeah.
There are so many more. But, if we're talking getting in a room, and the other thing about the show is, if you're the editor, you can offer an idea. And if you're the sound person or the PA or the whatever,
right?
You can offer an idea. Right. We're a very best idea, wins sort of show. And often the show starts with you saying, hey, I saw this ad last night and they said this, or this ad. So often some of our best staff comes in because someone who's not in what you would call the core creative crew of the show comes in and goes, oh, I saw this ad last night that I loved, or I hate this ad they keep playing in The Bachelor, right? And that's where it'll start.
Right. Yeah.
And you'll be like, well, why do you hate it? Let's have a look at it. And we'll pull it up on the screen.
Dissect it,
and we'll all sit around and we're going, oh, that is weird. Why would they do that? What's that about?
That's awesome.
And so then we start doing what I did with the poster. We just start going,
Why?
Why that?
Yeah.
And why this? And what are they trying to do? And so then the process is us putting, what is this? Is this a segment? Is this just an idea? Is this a joke? Now we have, James Colley, who we're working on a new thing with the show where we do a specific monologue about something in the industry. So James Colley, writes those, certainly conceives those and does a lot of the writing and then collaborates with me to sort of, make it work for me. Or,
exactly.
He's very good at also, the thing I love about the James is, and this is probably again, why the show has been successful for a long time, is that we have a crew of people that trust me enough, because what I like to do is trust them enough to go, hey, here's what I'd like to do, or here's how I imagine this will be. But I don't want to sit down and go, so do this, and do this, and do this, and do this. I want to go, here's what I think this is about, or what I want to, here are my questions, right? Go away, research, and find me some answers, and come back and tell me what we think the most interesting stuff is. And then we have a meeting, and we look at some stuff, and we put it together, and we have a conversation with each other about, what do you find interesting, or what do you think the question is here, or whatever, and we start to compile it. Now, eventually, in that process, because it's going to be through my mouth and through my vision to a certain extent, there's a point where I have to start feeding that into, well, here's what I am going to do.
Yeah.
But often that could be 90% my idea, it could be 90% other people's ideas, and I would not be able to tell you from week to week which was what, because that's not how we do it. We're not looking at a piece of paper where somebody's saying I got this much in, or that's the thing that I came up with, or whatever. Who knows? By the time we get to the thing where we go, this is what we want to do, I can't remember who suggested most of the stuff, and I don't care. And the minute that we started divvying it up like that would be, I'm a big believer in not having too many people in the room. As in, I see these shows and they'll employ 8 writers for a show that really needs 4.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because, and then what happens is, you got 4 people who aren't getting their ideas up. Right? You think it's going to make your show better. But it's not. You've got too many different voices. It's hard to get everybody on the same page. Suddenly you're getting people counting jokes because they're worried about their job because, half of their stuff's not getting up or whatever. I'm a very big believer in going, how many people do we need to do this? And then we should have not one single more person than what we need to make this, because it actually starts to work against you. Right? You've got to have enough, but not too much. And you've got to trust people, Sophie went from being like I said, a researcher to being the head writer of the most popular entertainment show on the ABC. And she's brilliant. And, she writes differently to John, in the style of, but not exactly the same as. And we had to trust that this, young woman who had never been the head writer on a TV show, I don't think at that point, now has been on a bunch of shows, but at the point where she became our head writer, I don't think she'd ever been head writer on anything.
Wow, right.
And we were the most successful show on our network, and we put in someone head writing that who had never head written a show before. But we did it because she was the person, right? She'd been with the show, she understood the show, and she deserved it. She was ready to go. And if Soph moves on, then I hope by the time that happens, there's someone within our organisation who's been put in a place and is ready to do it. And I would expect them to then put their own spin on it. Right. In the same way as Soph has. Yeah. I want, Soph's version of this show and James's version of this show and Sarah's version of this show and all their versions of the show. That's what helps it. That's what makes it better, right? If it's only me opening my mouth, then I'm literally only hearing things that I already know.
Yeah.
Right?
That's not learning, right?
It's not learning.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now all the things I know or the opinions I have.
Well, what do you learn?
Right?
Yeah.
But what if I just shut up in a meeting for half an hour and you all tell me your things and then I just regurgitate them as if they are my things? I'm going to be heaps more well-rounded and educated.
Right. Well, I think it's time for a song.
I think you're right.
Listen to Laugh Out Proud
with Z&G
on Joy 94.9.
Hi, I'm Ryan Shelton. You're listening to Laugh Out Proud with Z&G on Joy 94.9.
Are you kicking yourself that the Gruen wasn't on for a little bit more this year to cover the Coles mini collectible things?
It's interesting, isn't it? There's always one or two. There's always one or two things, regardless of what they are, that you go,
I know.
Oh, this would have been a good
I
week.
feel like this one's a whole
been an easy
new
week.
level, though, of... you got to come back and do something on it, because it's a whole new level.
You know what? Technically, though, it's actually not even new. So there was this thing called Shopkins. And yeah, so anyway, before there were Coles Mini Collectibles, there were Shopkins. And you were like, what are Shopkins? Well, here's what they are. Essentially, the exact same thing as Coles Mini Collectibles. And Shopkins are one of the biggest...
in Australia?
They're an Australian success story, but they're international now, and they're worth millions and millions of dollars. And it's exactly the same sort of
little
conceit, tiny products.
Interesting.
Right?
Oh, wow.
And we did a segment on it in Gruen a few years ago because Sophie, that was literally a Sophie segment. It was one of those things that I'd never ever heard of because it's not in my world.
Yeah.
Again, right? We're never going to do a segment on, like, we did ASMR in the final episode this season. I wasn't aware of it until somebody came to the meeting and said, have you heard of this thing, ASMR? And then
I was waiting for you to say whispered in your ear and was like, is this giving
Well, I find it incredibly creepy. And
I don't know what John Goodman said yes to that ad, though. That's a weird yes. Well, I guess if you're getting Macca's money, then, it's going to...
So it's like one of those things where, so Soph brought that to the table. But to me, I love that stuff because... And I might even write some stand-up about it because to me that's right at the heart of what we're not having engagement. We have you see all these articles in the paper about these Coles, mini shop things, right? And the articles will be about that they're a sensation. There'll be articles about the fact that they're plastic and they just ban plastic and how can they do a plastic thing. There'll be articles about kids trading them at school. There'll be articles about kids concentrating on their education. They're blah, blah, blah. All these articles, right? But I don't see one single article questioning the idea that we are allowing a company, the two major supermarkets in this country get about 80 cents in every dollar that is spent retail in this country is to one of the two major supermarkets, right? These two major supermarkets, the reason they can sell you $1 milk is because that somebody's being exploited down the line. That's how it works, right? So there's farmers who don't have enough money because Coles wants to lure you into Coles with the $1 milk or whatever, right? So, this is the system that we are talking about. But more than that, these are just little toy brands.
Yeah.
Like, the bottle is the same shape, the color is the same shape. So all those things, if we go back to what I was talking about earlier, right? The reason that the Milo tin looks like that is because the marketing team at Milo went, this color is sympathetic and this looks good and whatever. And we've just given kids a box of ads.
Yeah,
right?
Literally, yeah.
And at a time, it's been proved scientifically that kids' minds, up until, basically into their early teens, they can't tell the difference between advertising and reality. Like, they just can't tell. Your brain isn't developed enough to be able to tell, right? Like, you can perhaps say, that's a TV ad and that's not a TV ad, but the idea that you're subtly being marketed to all the time is indistinguishable to you, right? So by the time we are grown adults, we have been so subtly manufactured into this system of just being completely unthinking about the fact that we are constantly surrounded by brands and advertising, and all those things are manipulating us and fucking with us. Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
In some way, right? Whether it's a subtle way, whether it's, the color of it's been chosen to give you the bottle of drink in front of you, but that color's been chosen because it's refreshing, right?
Okay.
It makes you think, right? That, that, you know what? I do feel like a refreshing beverage, and that looks refreshing, right?
It is, yeah.
So your brain is being manipulated by that, regardless of whether you're consciously and actively thinking of that or not, right? And we just hand children a bunch of these, and we normalize that consumerism into their brain and hardwire it into their brain without even a conversation about, hey, do you reckon it's a good idea that we're just turning our little kids into the idea that rampant consumerism is a healthy thing, for their society, for their aspirational value, for their mental health, for the environment, for the planet. Anyway, buy tickets to my show. Books available.
Can we just quickly talk about, because you split your time between Australia and the US for a little while.
Well, literally until the end of this month when I gave notice on my apartment a week ago. So end of September will be the end of...
Were you living in LA?
Yeah, in LA.
Yeah, LA, right.
Yeah,
so how...
But I literally have been there a month in the last 12 months, and I felt like that was... A lot of my friends have been having a good time staying at my place, but I felt like after a while that it probably wasn't the wisest financial move I'd ever made in my life.
True.
So, yeah.
So what was it like, in the American comedy scene, or specifically the LA comedy scene, or did you move around a lot? Moved
around a lot.
Yeah.
So I played I I think 22 states in the end over the 8 years or 9 years I was there. So I probably spent about 4 years total. Like, I was spending about half of each year there. So I probably spent 4 or 5 years, like total living in the US, but it was over, 8.5 years, you know, and in bursts. I'd go for 2 months or 3 months and then come back here to do, Gruen or whatever, and then go back and then come back in or do the festivals or whatever. So I was literally just sort of, splitting my time. And yeah, I would tour there a lot, play comedy clubs and go on the road. And, but part of it for me was like I was getting a sort of to see America, and just, it was fun. I was having a good time. I would come here and do my work, and then I get to go and actually do what it is that I love doing, which is like, I go to Chicago for a week and play a comedy club, and literally I'm doing 5 shows, that are 50 minutes a set, like these headlining shows at these clubs. The clubs are full because the clubs have a audience, and people love you because the great thing in comedy is that people always think, like, I would get asked by journalists and stuff, they would be like, but when you're so successful here, why would you, by the way, that's not me saying that, but that literally is what they would say. Yeah. They'll be like, I don't understand why, like, when you're so successful here, like, why you would go somewhere else and start again. And I was like, yeah, but it's an essential misunderstanding about comedy, right? So the last thing you want to do, like, I find this hilarious in America because often people are introduced with their credits. Yeah, right. You might have seen this guy on Saturday Night Live and, The Late Show, and blah, 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 right? Peter Hallier used to come onto stage during the festival. I loved it. It was like, ladies and gentlemen, could you please turn off your mobile phones and lower your expectations? It's Peter Hallier, right? And I loved it because that's where you should start in comedy, right? Because comedy is really about the expectation gap, right? Right. So, best gigs you ever do are when people don't know that you're going to be great, and then they realize that you're great.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
So, if someone comes and sees my Melbourne Comedy Festival show, like, the truth of it is I'm charging, a decent amount of money. They've made a commitment. They've probably got a babysitter coming to the city. If it's 2 of you, you're probably spending like $200 or $250 on your night. They expect it to be good. And they've become because, A, maybe because they've come before and they have an expectation of it being good, or B, because, I'm big enough a name or an act or whatever, and the price is enough that they go, I've made an investment in this that I expect it will be good.
Some return,
right?
Almost, yeah.
So it's got to be like 7 or 8 out of 10 to even meet their minimum standards of the investment they've put in the evening. Right? Right? And to really blow them away, like, they're starting it at 8. They expect an 8, right? Yeah. So to like blow them away, you've got to get a 9 or a 10 out of there, and then they're still like, yeah, that was better than, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if you're playing a club where they've come because, come and see headliner, and you're someone who, because the truth of it is that, like, a lot of people who are out there on the road over there doing those shows that don't have the experience that I have.
Yeah, right.
And secondly, I have the thing that I've never had before here, which is the weapon of being an other.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And being a friendly other. So when you go to the UK as an Australian comedian, you are not a friendly other. Our relationship with the United Kingdom is one of, big brother, little brother, and, because of the cricket and the rivalry and that every pub has an Aussie backpacker behind the bar and whatever, that there's no charm to people from the United, in fact, they're kind of angry that you were once a prisoner and who lived in their country, and they sent you to the set of Home and Away rather than going out there themselves and leaving you in miserable plague-ridden London. So there's that sort of level, and same with New Zealand, same with, like, you go to these, and Canada doesn't care because we're just Canada down under. True, the only place that it's like a joy that you get a superpower, you get your Danny boy, accent, bonus. Is America. Right. Americans love Australians, and they like the way our voice sounds, and they like the way that we talk about things, and they like our attitude on life. So I would just find on the road that I'd kill. Right. You know what I mean? Wow. Like, the audiences would love me.
Nice.
My stuff would translate really well. It was easy to reframe it. Right. Like, they liked my attitude to their country, that's changed a little bit. Because it was before Trump, you could really have a go at America. Like, I used to have this whole bit about, how like I would start really arrogant. I kind of had this idea that I would just like come out and I was like, you should applaud. Because I'm from Australia and we are your last remaining friend in the world. Right. I was like, I don't know if you guys know this, but after World War II, you were very popular. Like every country was picking up your phone calls. You were literally and figuratively the bomb. But since then, your shit has dropped off. And there is only one little country from down under when they get a 4 o'clock phone call. We're going to war again. Where? That same country we've been 3 times unsuccessfully in the last decade. Fuck it, we're in. We'll grab a slab. We're coming. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. We're the only other country in the world that still calls it soccer. We are with you guys. And you had that capacity to kind of attack their country in a way that was like, we're your friend and our fortunes are tied to your fortunes. And now I'm going to critique you guys through that prism. And people liked it.
Yeah, right.
But once Trump got elected, that changed. It really changed in those rooms because you can't attack America anymore without it seeming like
you're going after him.
Everyone's so divided now.
Yeah.
But the minute you just, like, even if you're not mentioning him or his name or whatever, you're just talking about something that they consider to be a non-Trump related.
Yeah, right.
Then you're done. So it stopped being as much fun.
Interesting.
So what's coming up for Wil? What's happening in Wil Anderson's life? Are you writing the next year's comedy festival?
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about it. I'm thinking. That's literally what I'm doing. I'm trying to I think it's a really interesting time for straight white men to think about what legitimate thing do you have to say? Right?
Yeah.
It feels weird. To even joke about this, but I often, when one of my straight white friends is, having a bit of a, complain about the fact that finally other voices are being recognised in the world, I'm like, well, you got to think about it. We really reaped the benefits of the last gasp of the straight white man. You know what I mean? Like we were as it was going out, we just got to have the last glory years of that. So be grateful for what we got. Don't be bitter that it's over. You know what I mean?
So there's no show next year.
But I think there is a responsibility then to go, well, part of it is I think the last thing that anybody needs is a straight white man talking about things that are other people's stories to tell. There was a time for that. There was a time for you to be an advocate. There was a time where I had a lot of material about, whatever, same-sex marriage or feminism or whatever, where I think that it probably was important, or at least I thought it was important, to speak for those who didn't have a mainstream voice. But really the problem was that those people didn't have a mainstream voice, right? Right?
Yeah.
The problem was that I was the only person to, well, not the, do you know what I mean? But in that thing, you felt like, whereas what I've come to realize and how the world has changed, and I think it's a brilliant thing, is that now those voices can be represented by the people who actually, they're their stories to tell, right? And I think that the last thing that anybody needs to hear now is someone else advocating on those people's behalf. I think what people want is what my personal perspective is step aside and create a space for those people to tell those stories and those people to talk about those things, and challenge yourself then to go, okay, well now, what do I talk about that is still a legitimate and interesting and compelling thing for people to, relate to and whatever, but, that isn't, that is, and that's, I don't know, I'm confused by that. I don't know what the answer to that question is, because many of the things that I used to talk about, I don't think are things that, anybody needs to hear another, white straight man banging on about at the moment. So what do I talk about?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, but in my, I don't go, I've got, there's a certain type of old school comedian who's like, and you can't even bloody, talk about bloody abos and poofs anymore. It's bloody political correctness. You can't. And I can't talk about a lot of the other things that I talk about anymore.
Yeah.
So now I have to work out what I can talk about. And that's a challenge. And I don't know the answer to that question, but that's the question I've got to answer, right?
Yeah.
I've got to work out what is a legitimate and compelling thing for me to talk about now, and not get shitty about the fact that that's hard. Be excited about the fact that that's hard, you know, because it's going to take me to a place where I'm going to be doing something. Like I got arrested last year, and my whole show was about being arrested. And it was great because it gave me an opportunity to tell a story that at its heart is a story about people seeing things from different perspectives.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like something happened, and on that day, various different people interpreted the same events in different ways.
Right.
And so for me, I had a real life story that also had like a broader social thing, because I think one of the things that is very much emblematic of our age, right, is the idea that facts aren't facts anymore. People can look at the same things and, you know, come up with a whole range of different perspectives on what happened. So for me, that was an interesting, so that's what I'm talking about. To me, I was like, oh, well, that's a good idea. That's the thing that is compelling and interesting to talk about in the world, is this idea that, you know, facts can be viewed in different ways, and that, you know, often you don't look at things from other people's perspectives when you're in the middle of something and whatever. So I had this personal story that had a broader, universal, interesting idea that I could talk about.
Right.
So I have to work that out. Like I have to work out what next year's version of that is without getting arrested again, because that was really, it was worth it in the end, but not at the time.
I guess next year's Wil pun will be a bit harder now. Is that?
Well, the show I had again. So this is the thing about it, though.
Oh,
right?
you would have had to have.
I've already had to come up with it just then, like literally last week.
Oh, jeez, right.
Last week, my manager called me and said, "It's that time. You've got to tell me what your new show's called."
Was it an on the spot job? I was like, oh, far out.
Well, I had to have a look at I've got a list.
Right. Got the list.
So I went to my list.
Right on.
I went through my list.
How many? Can you ballpark how many Wil puns you got in there?
Yeah. So I've got probably 25 on my list that I think are usable
and still haven't been used.
Yeah. I don't think I've got 25 shows left in me, but I think I'll run it, and they tend to get added to. It's one of those things again. I'm a collector, right?
Right.
So whenever there's something that you see that has if there's a movie that comes out that has some Wil play or whatever, you're like, oh, I hope that's really successful. That'd be,
right.
You know, that'd be really good. That'd be handy for me. So no, the show's going to be called Wil Informed.
Oh, nice.
And the idea
Very
is,
good.
I guess, like it was like I looked up the dictionary definition of ill-informed, and I thought it was something that I think, you know, I went from, as I told you, like early on in my career, having quite definitive positions and ideas about you know, what I thought about things. And I think if there's one thing that really sums me up now, is that I have more questions than I have answers. You know, that often I feel like so much of your life is about breaking down those unconscious biases that you had there that you didn't even realize that you had.
You're right.
Right.
You know, that thing of like not realizing, right? You know, I went on. Well, I mean, Gruen's a good example, right?
Yeah.
So we have 3 male permanent hosts on that show. If we were making that show today, you just wouldn't make a show that had 3 male. Like we have exclusively female guests now to try to and that,
even
you know, since I've been EP of the show, that has been 100% of the time. And it's probably the thing I'm probably most proud of about the show, but it's still not equal. Like there's still 3 regular male hosts and 2. If we were setting it up today, we'd never set it up that way. You just wouldn't. But that was only 11 years ago when we did it. Yeah. And it was a world where no one even had that conversation about, hey, do you reckon it's weird that we have 3 men? That's how short ago that people, and this is not, we're not talking about the footy show on Channel 9 or something.
No.
We're talking about an Andrew Denton produced show on the ABC. You know?
Yeah.
Right?
True.
Like, so even in that environment, that was a space where people weren't saying, hey, should one of these people have a diverse background? Should one of these people be a person of color or a woman or someone who isn't just like a straight white guy, right? So things do change very quickly. And I think that you can either be the person who complains that things have changed, or you can be constantly open to the idea that things will continue to change.
Yeah,
exactly.
And your capacity to deal is going to be about your capacity to deal with things changing, right?
Adapting,
and be open to change, right? Don't see it as like a, stumbling block, or like, oh no, I can't talk about any of these things anymore. Okay, good. You know, there's other people who can, and I'm pleased that they now have their space, and I think it makes comedy better that all these voices are in comedy. Like, it's better for the whole thing that I do that all these voices are here, and it also challenges me. It says to me, if you want to remain relevant in this conversation, you now have to go off and do something different to what it has done before. Now, if that stuff hadn't come along, I wouldn't have had to. So as an artist, I could have just continued to replicate the things that had made me successful, right? But I can't do that anymore, right? So, sorry, I'm really banging on.
No, we're loving it. Keep going.
Loving it. This is
but
great.
yeah, I think that you try to, let that adversity, let the fact that I am scared and worried and puzzled and confused about
positive
what
evolution.
it is,
embrace
to go, all right, well, now I have a problem that I need to solve, which is what is something that I'm interested enough in talking about and is relevant for me to talk about for next year. And hopefully if I find an answer to that question, it'll mean that the thing that I'm doing is, interesting and compelling.
Now, other than the comedy festival next year, any other dates we can plug?
Comedy festival's fine. Yep. I have podcasts. I have a bunch of podcasts. There's one called Wilosophy, which is on hiatus, but we're putting out some theme episodes. People. So the first one's going to be about comedy, but the second one's about mental health, and it's just bits of conversations I've had with people along the way that are similarly themed, and we've kind of cut some of them together, which is cool. And I have a really dumb AFL podcast for people who like conversations about whether the players wash their own socks more than they like conversations about actual sport. It is called Two Guys, One Cup, an AFL podcast. And be careful Googling that.
Don't do it at work.
It was a funny idea at the start because the other guy, so my team, the Bulldogs, and my friend who barracks for the Saints, they both only had one premiership, and the whole conceit of the podcast was we were two guys who followed teams that had never won, and that was the bond. And then the first year we did the podcast, the Bulldogs won the premiership. It really just ruined the whole dynamic of our podcast.
And people get you on the Instagrams and the Twitters?
Yeah, just I'm on like, I always say find me where you are, right? Yep. Like, no one's going to go out of their way, but if you're on something, see if I'm on it.
Right.
Like the train or like
the internet.
Like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Do you have your own website, Will?
Yeah, it's no good though. My website pretty much just tells you that.
Would you go
to
Wix?
Facebook?
My website pretty much tells you what I just told you, which was go to other places. I'm there more than I am here.
Right on. We'll be there anyway. So that's all right. Well, thank you so much for coming down. We'll really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. G'day, this is Wil Anderson, and you're listening to Laugh Out Proud with ZNG on Joy 94.9.